to We Create, the podcast that brings to light creative projects in our community. My name is Linda Salzer, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about this second career is going to be the death of me. I'd like to introduce my friend, Karen Kelly. Karen and I got to know each other because we worked together on various team projects at AT&T. After working in corporate America for 28 years, she made the decision to retire early and return to school to obtain a degree in funeral service. She is now working part-time at the Cannon Funeral Home in Albany. Karen, what gave you the idea of wanting to work in a funeral home?
Well, first off, Linda, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this project.
Well, welcome.
I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it started early for me. Not so much funeral service, but just the idea of being helpful to people in general. My background, I started as a kid at 16 working at the A&P, if you remember that, as a cashier.
Oh, sure.
And I think that helped me develop a rapport with the public. I wasn't afraid to talk to people as they came through my line. And then as I grew older and got other jobs, right out of college, I started working for Albany Senior Service Centers. I majored in business administration and gerontology in college. So my idea was always wanting to work with the aged. I did that for about 3 or 4 years. I loved it, but it couldn't pay the bills. I ended up having two other part-time jobs just to get by. I had a very short stint at RPI where I met this gentleman who was an alumna of RPI who worked for AT&T down in New Jersey. And we had lunch one day. I was working in development, and he was one of my prospects, and I was supposed to be able to get, I think, $100,000 from him as a donation. He was a father of 6. I knew there was no way that he'd be able to give any money. So over lunch one day, he said, "Karen, this doesn't seem right to you. You know that I can't give any money. Would you be interested in working for AT&T?" I didn't really give it much thought. And he goes, "Fax me your resume tomorrow." Those back in the days when. And so I did, and the next day I had a job offer. And it was odd in that it was an occupational job or a union represented job, and I had to take a test. And he goes, "Pending the results of your test, don't expect you not to be able to pass it. You'll have the job if you're able to pass the test." I took the test, I passed it, and I started working for the Relay Service of New York, which was an AT&T provided service for the deaf and hard of hearing. And it was really a great job. One of the best jobs I've ever had. It was considered operator services, but ultimately what you were doing was setting up communications for the deaf so they could talk to anybody. And ultimately they would call this 800 number, and that 800 number connected us, to the operators, which were me and 300 others, and we would type everything that we hear and read everything that is typed via the TTY. And it was just so fulfilling. You knew that you were being helpful. You weren't part of the conversation, but you were. You were an invisible third party. And it just gave a lot of meaning to me.
That sounds like a really important job that really did mean a lot to people because they needed that service.
Absolutely. You didn't have the technology like we do today. I don't think that really is really used that much. But what I also got involved in was reaching out to the elderly population who gradually lost their hearing, and we brought TTYs into their home and we taught them how to use this equipment. I was coming back full circle, dealing with the elderly people, being communicative. I really felt my purpose. And then the center closed. As you know, Linda, AT&T is forever changing and evolving.
Yeah.
This was one of the things that kind of fell to the wayside with AT&T. The gentleman that had helped me find the job knew that this was happening, and he reached out to me and he asked me if I had any interest in moving to New Jersey because that's where the jobs were. At the time, I was young. Why not? That's how I got to New Jersey and working in AT&T, and then eventually into management. long story short is that as my career moved forward within AT&T, I got less and less involved with serving the public. I had a stint, I went into network management, and as I grew in my knowledge of network management, I was given more opportunities. And one of the opportunities was to work with the network disaster recovery team. So now I'm back out into the field, and I'm working with the public, and I'm working with people in a low time of their life. They've just lost a home, or their home was damaged, or they're displaced because of hurricane or forest fire, whatever the disaster was. We would mobilize and we would go in. So that was fulfilling. I did that for about 6 years. And then, Linda, I met you when I went to planning.
And we had a lot of fun, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
But just before, I knew, the disaster recovery work was changing as well. And probably about 10 years before I left, that's when going back to school popped in my head. I always had the plan to retire early. I knew that at a certain points in my career, I had to check off to be eligible for retirement, and that would mean that I'd be about 52. About 10 years, when I was in my early 40s, I went back to school, and it was a local community college in Pennsylvania that offered mortuary science or funeral service. So I started. It took me a couple of years because I knew that I wanted to serve people in some way or another. And I think working in disaster recovery, you kind of already were dealing with people at a really low time in their life. And you felt so useful when you were able to help them. So I thought funeral service might be a calling for me. My mom passed away. We had a great experience with the funeral director. He became a good friend of mine. The gentleman that I work for now, I've known him all my life. We grew up together. And so that's how I got there. I guess that was a long story to tell you that's how I got to funeral service.
So you got the idea of wanting to work in a funeral home because you really felt a connection to people that were at their lowest point.
That's right.
You were able to help them.
That's at least what I, thought, I'd be useful in. I was in a point in my life where I could be philanthropic with my time. And that was important to me. And it's rewarding when someone says, I don't know if I could have gotten through this without you and what you do. So it's a rewarding job. People think, oh, how can you do that? It's so sad. Sad, certainly. But I think it gives you such a good feeling to know that you were part of someone when they needed you the most. You helped them.
I remember when my father passed away in 2011, and some of the most important people to me were the people that were at hospice and helped me through the transition of how to emotionally handle what was happening, because I was out of my element there. I didn't understand what to do next. So I really imagine how important you really are in that role.
I try to be helpful. I haven't had too many bad experiences. I think the gentleman that I work for, John Cannon, I don't say this because I work with him. I say this because it's the truth. He's probably the most compassionate person I've ever met. And he is really the very best at what he does.
Oh, that's terrific. And what do you do at the funeral home?
Well, I'm not licensed in New York State. I thought long and hard about going back to school again once I retired. But, Linda, I just didn't have it in me.
Yeah.
I was enjoying retirement, and I was, as you know, we have a small camp out in the foothills of the Berkshires, and, I've been enjoying that. But I did want to work. I did want to do something. I wanted to feel useful in retirement, and I just didn't want to go back to school. And the good thing about funeral service is that you don't have to be licensed to work in the funeral home. The things that I do primarily for John are clerical in nature and what's the word I want to use? social in nature. In that I'm the face that people see when they first come into the funeral home. Imagine that, Linda, huh? This mug.
Yeah.
I'm also there when people are planning for the wake and the service. So technology has been a great thing for the funeral service because
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In what way? I can't even imagine.
Well, we work with families in creating a video tribute.
Oh,
so
okay.
We work with them in getting pictures together, information about them, so we can put together a video that plays in the background during a wake or a service.
Oh.
Depending on how the family wants to be engaged is how good the product is. Those little things, because if you think about a video, everybody has photo albums, and
Sure.
now, your kids won't probably have a photo album. Everything will be on their phone in their hand. Some older people that pass away, they have these pictures and photo albums, and we help them digitize them and get them in a DVD, and then we talk to them about music. What type of music did your loved one like? And we kind of match up that kind of thing, and we add music to it with the pictures, and it becomes something that probably the thing that families love the most. It's a keepsake. We give them the DVD, but we also always have them online for their, to watch any time of the day that they miss their loved one, and it gives them comfort. And now with COVID, where we couldn't memorialize people the way that we were accustomed to, coming to the funeral home, seeing, visiting the family, or expressing your condolences. Everything had to be remote. We learned how to stream services for people who wouldn't be able to. In the very beginning, we only could have 10 people in the funeral home for a service. So how do you determine what 10 get to go? We were able to use technology, to memorialize people, to give people comfort, to let people express their condolences. It really taught us a great deal during this really difficult time.
And probably you've opened it up to, a lot more people that wouldn't have been able to come because it's online.
Absolutely.
That's a great service.
It is. And there were some talk before COVID about opening up to streaming, but people weren't really open to it. But when you were not forced to stream, certainly it was their choice whether or not to stream, but when you saw the possibilities because people couldn't travel to come to the funeral home, it really opened up things. And I think it's the wave of the future, even beyond COVID. I think people are going to want to memorialize people.
Oh, that's terrific. I want to ask you, is there anything that surprised you the most after you started working there?
I think, I don't know if surprise is the right word. I think I became more understanding in that we're all alike, more alike than we are different.
And is that because we all have the common bond of all going through the grieving process, or what do you think?
I think it's two things, all right? Every person has the same two things in common. We are born into the world, and we depart the world. All right? Culturally, people view death differently. Culturally, religiously, there's many facets. The rainbow of people, that how they grieve and how they mourn and how they go through the process is different, but it's similar. And that was what surprised me. Linda, I grew up in an area that was 90% Catholic, white. We had 5 Catholic churches within walking distance. I knew nothing of anything else beyond the Catholic tradition. I became more aware of ethnic diversity and religious diversity when I went away to college, but it didn't really impact me. Of course, working at AT&T that's so diverse, that certainly helped me to expand my world. But working in funeral service, and in particular John's funeral home, we have people from all different walks of life, all different religions. You see the spectrum of, people's cultures. Although many things were different, there were things that thread us together as a community. no one grieves more or grieves less, or we all kind of go through the process, whether it's a good process or bad process. It's a process. So that surprised me how much we had in common.
I think that's very insightful, and you're really bringing home that each one of us has that in common with each other. That there's no boundaries to the end of life, in the sense that we all have to go through it. We're all in this together.
That's true. I read a book when I was studying, I believe his name is John Lynch, and he's a funeral director, I think out in Illinois, but he's also a poet, and he's a writer, and really quite wonderful. And I read his book called The Undertaking, and it's a collection of short stories of his life, different experiences that he had as a funeral director. And the opening of his book, he starts with saying, the dead don't care. And he goes on to explain that the dead don't care no matter, what your religion is or what your belief is in the afterlife. You don't care. If you're religious and you believe that there's heaven and you're going to see Jesus Christ, you won't care that you're dead because you're in this utopia that you've been told is the best thing ever. If you believe in reincarnation, you don't care that you're dead because you're going on to your next life. Mm-hmm. If you believe in nothing, that you just go blank, you don't care because it's over. There's nothing left. And it kind of put things in perspective for me that when people come to us and say, I need to plan mom's services or my brother's services or my husband's service, many people often say, well, mom she insisted that we do this, this, and that. And of course we'll do whatever you wish us to do, but I'm here to help you. What would make you comfortable? Because mom is dead and the dead don't care.
Yeah.
But if by doing everything that she wished gives you comfort and satisfaction, let's do it.
That must give people a lot of reassurance to know that they have permission to do what makes them feel comfortable in honoring their loved one.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. When my grandmother passed away, my mom's mom, my grandmother wasn't the most pleasant person, let's just say that. And she had 3 sons, and she was very protective of them. She only liked one daughter-in-law. The other 2 daughter-in-laws she didn't really care for. And she said specifically in her will that it was to be at one funeral home, and only her 3 sons could attend the wake with the one daughter-in-law and those grandchildren. The other grandchildren and the other daughter-in-laws were excluded. This actually was written. So when my grandmother passed away at 99, her favorite son and his family said, well, this is what Nana wanted. We're going to go to this funeral home, and this is what we're going to do. And my father goes, no, I'm her son. I'm her executor. We're going to go to this other funeral home. We're going to have an open wake. My wife and children are going to be there, and this is what we're going to do. What she wrote down is just insulting. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a rift. The one grandchild said, you're not doing what Nana wants. I'm not going to do that. I thought it was good. And for someone who was 99 that died, it was one of the biggest wakes I've ever been to. We, all the neighborhood people came because my parents were active in the neighborhood, and we lived very close to my grandmother. And it was the most healing thing for my father in particular. He saw his friends were able to reminisce with him. Mm-hmm. But my grandmother was wrong to impact something that really just wasn't something that should be done. And so, like you said, you give yourself permission to do what you need to do.
Well, that's a real testimony to your family, being able to, have the thought and presence of mind to do that. It takes some courage to do that, really.
Well, I think it might be cultural. I was brought to wakes and funerals as a very young child. My mother, in particular, said, you cannot be afraid of this stuff. You need to, put your big girl pants on, and we'll get through this together as a family, as friends. And I remember the first wake going. It was for my godfather who had passed away, and I was probably about 5, but I remember it vividly, and waiting to see what I'd see, and that it wasn't bad. It was all good. I think it just is a healthier way to be. But I also understand people's fears too. It's there, and I understand it.
Well, your mother sounds like a great role model for where you're at today. You have the empathy.
I think she would be really proud, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I know she would.
Well, we're getting to the end of the podcast, but I do want to ask you one more question. Is there anything you'd like the listeners to know about how to prepare for the end of life or for their funeral, or what should they know and when should they start preparing?
It's a great question, Linda. It's very personal. The business side of me, the funeral service side of me, would suggest everyone to pre-plan. It's not a waste of money. It puts down on paper what one would want or what they don't want, whether they want to be cremated or buried or donate their body to science. This way, it's formally done. But you don't have to formally do it either. I mean, we encourage pre-planning, but as long as you openly communicate to your loved ones that your intentions, what you would like.
Would you recommend having a video expressing your desires or putting it on paper? What do you think? What's the best way?
Well, I think writing anything down is good. A video, sure, maybe that's the future, Linda. Who knows? Who would have thought that we'd be talking into a little square, thin piece of thing and looking at videos and looking at the internet at that? Who would have thought that? But it's the key here, Linda, is about communication.
Mm-hmm.
You let people know, and hopefully have good people by your side that are listening and taking note. And when your time comes, you won't care.
Well, that sounds like great advice, and all of us can start thinking about that before it's too late, because I think when we're in the middle of our grief, that's probably not an easy time to do that. So
it's true.
Thinking about it ahead of time probably really helps.
I think so.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for being on We Create. I really appreciated this time and this great conversation about what you're doing with your second career.
Thank you, Linda. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you join me in retirement one day soon.
I hope so, too. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Linda.